I thought she was my best friend, until I realized she was slowly destroying me. Not all poison comes in bottles. Some of it walks, talks, laughs with you, and hugs you tight right before it slices into your self-worth. Her name was Haley. We met during my sophomore year of college. She had this magnetic energy, the kind of girl who turned heads when she walked into a room, not just because of how she looked, but because of how she made people feel. She was bold, funny, unapologetically confident. And somehow, she chose me to be her person. At first, it felt like I had won the friendship lottery. We did everything together. Study sessions that turned into wine nights, random road trips, midnight talks about our dreams, our childhoods, our heartbreaks. She knew my deepest fears, how I used to bite my nails until they bled when I was anxious, how I never felt like I was enough growing up, how my parents' divorce had left me terrified of abandonment. I told her things I hadn't told anyone, and she told me I was safe with her. That was the first lie. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about toxic people, they don't show up with warning labels. The manipulations start small, almost invisible. I remember the first time she made me feel off. I had just gotten an internship I'd worked really hard for, with a nonprofit I deeply admired. I called Haley, thrilled, expecting the kind of screaming, excited reaction we always had for each other's wins. Instead, she said, "Oh, that's cute. I didn't know you were into charity work now." I laughed, awkwardly. "Yeah, I've always wanted to work in that space." She smirked. "No offense, babe. I just thought you were more ambitious than that." I told myself she didn't mean it that way, that maybe she was having a bad day. But it stuck. That seed of doubt. Haley was full of jokes like that. Like the time I wore a dress I loved to a party. I remember spinning in front of the mirror, genuinely feeling beautiful, until she walked in and said, that's adorable. You're finally trying with your looks." Or when I got a new haircut and she wrinkled her nose. "It's different. I guess you're going for the quirky librarian vibe now." She always followed it up with a laugh. "I'm just kidding, you know I love you." But it didn't feel like love. It felt like little paper cuts, tiny slices to my confidence that never got the chance to heal before the next one came. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I was misreading her tone. Maybe she was just honest. That's what she always said. "I'm just being real with you. I'd rather have a friend who tells me the truth than one who sugarcoats everything." And I believed her. Because I wanted to. I didn't realize then that there's a difference between honesty and cruelty disguised as concern. The deeper we got into the friendship, the more I started feeling like I was walking on eggshells. I couldn't share a win without her making it about herself. I couldn't dress up without a side eye or a sarcastic comment. She had this way of making me feel guilty for growing, for evolving, for simply being proud of myself. Once, I was talking to a mutual friend, Rachel, about a guy I had started seeing. Haley wasn't there, and I remember laughing, sharing how sweet he was and how happy I felt. The next day, Haley pulled me aside. "So, you and Rachel are what, best friends now?" I blinked. "What?" "No, we were just—" "You know, I don't care if you have other friends," she said, arms crossed. "But I'd expect you to tell me things before running your mouth to everyone else." I felt like I'd cheated on her. That's how she worked. She made loyalty feel like ownership. Like if I was her friend, I owed her my silence, my stories, my full attention. And yet, I kept defending her. To others. To myself. "She's just intense. She's been hurt before. She means well." But somewhere deep down I knew. I was shrinking. The worst part? Everyone else thought we were inseparable. They saw the Instagram photos, the brunches, the birthday surprises. They didn't see the nights I cried after she jokingly called me dumb in front of a group. They didn't see how I stopped applying for things I wanted because I didn't want her to think I was trying too hard. I lost pieces of myself, quietly, gradually, until one day, she crossed a line I couldn't ignore. It was my birthday. I had just turned 23, and after a rough year of self-doubt, I decided to do something small but meaningful. A backyard dinner party at my apartment with a few close friends, string lights, homemade pasta, a playlist of songs that felt like me. I even wore this soft lavender dress that made me feel beautiful, something I hadn't felt in a while. Haley offered to help set up. She showed up late, of course, with a bottle of cheap wine and a smile so wide it felt forced. I tried not to care. I told myself it was fine, she was busy, she had a lot going on. I still wanted her there. The night was going well, candles flickering, laughter, stories flowing. Then, somewhere between the second glass of wine and dessert, Haley stood up to give a toast. To my best friend, she said, raising her glass, who somehow managed to turn surviving into an aesthetic. There was a beat of silence. A few awkward laughs. I smiled, tight-lipped. She continued. I mean, seriously, who else could make anxiety and impulsive decisions look this cute? Let's be real, she might not know what she's doing with her life, but at least she's doing it in style. Laughter. Everyone thought it was a joke, but I didn't. I felt naked. Mocked. Diminished, right there in front of people I loved. People I had invited into my space, into my moment. I excused myself, locked myself in the bathroom, and stared at my reflection. What was I doing? Why had I let this go on for so long? That night, after everyone left, Haley texted me. I hope I didn't embarrass you too much. Just kidding. Love you, babe. Something inside me snapped. For the first time in a long time, I didn't text back. I didn't excuse her. I didn't gaslight myself into thinking I was being dramatic. I just sat with it, with the truth. She wasn't my friend. She was my cage. And the saddest part? I had built the lock myself, by trusting her, by believing her words, by making myself small enough to fit inside her version of who I should be. The days that followed were weird. I started noticing more. How often I let her opinions override my own. How I stopped wearing certain outfits because she once called them desperate. How I didn't post certain achievements online because I didn't want her joking about it in the group chat. How I'd second-guess even the simplest decisions down to what coffee order to get because she always had something to say. And I realized something horrifying. She had trained me to need her approval. Her voice lived in my head louder than my own. I remembered the time she told me I was too sensitive when I cried after she outed something deeply personal about me during a party. Or the way she rolled her eyes when I got excited about a new hobby. Or how she made plans with others and forgot to invite me, then guilt-tripped me for being weird about it. I thought about how she'd praise me one minute and punish me the next, withholding attention, giving me the cold shoulder, or making me feel like I was too much, too clingy, too emotional, too needy. Classic manipulation. Classic control. The final straw came a week after my birthday. I was having coffee with Rachel. Yes, the same friend Haley had gotten jealous about. I finally opened up about the party, the toast, all the weird things I'd kept inside for too long. Rachel looked stunned. And then she said something I'll never forget. I always thought something was off about the way she treated you, but I didn't want to interfere. That hit me hard, because it confirmed what I'd been too scared to admit, that others had seen it, too, that I wasn't imagining it, that the pain I felt had been real all along. That night, I wrote Haley a message. Not a long one. Not an angry one. Just the truth. I don't think this friendship is healthy for me anymore. I've spent too long feeling small and confused about why I'm never enough around you. I wish you well, but I'm stepping away from this. She replied 5 minutes later. Wow. So now I'm the villain? After everything I've done for you? Okay. Good luck finding someone else who puts up with your drama. You'll come crawling back. You always do. I blocked her. Phone. Instagram. Everything. And then I cried. Not just for the friendship, but for the version of myself I had lost inside it. The girl who twisted herself to be liked. Who believed criticism was care. Who thought love came with strings and jokes came with bruises. I cried until I felt empty. And then, strangely, I felt free. You always think the hardest part will be walking away. But no one warns you about what comes after. The silence. The empty space where their voice used to live, even if that voice was cruel. the habits that still linger. The instinct to text them when something funny happens or when life throws you a curveball. The phantom feeling of reaching for a friendship that isn't there anymore. In the days after I cut Haley off, I expected to feel stronger, empowered, even. But what I felt was shame. A deep, gnawing shame I couldn't explain. I kept wondering if I'd overreacted. If maybe she wasn't toxic, maybe I was just difficult, too sensitive, too dramatic. After all, that's what she'd always said. It took me a while to realize I wasn't grieving her. I was grieving the version of myself I had lost in that friendship. That realization hit me hard. I started journaling, not because I was trying to be poetic, but because I genuinely didn't know who I was anymore without her opinions filling up my mind. I had spent so long seeking her approval that I forgot how to trust my own. There were moments I'd catch myself doing things like putting on lipstick, then wiping it off because Haley said it made me look like I was trying too hard. Or second-guessing a caption on Instagram because she once mocked one of mine in the group chat. These invisible chains were still wrapped around me, even after she was gone. That's the thing about emotional manipulation. It doesn't just wound you while it's happening. It rewires you. I started reading about toxic friendships, the signs, the patterns, the effects, and I saw my experience written in black and white. Backhanded compliments, guilt-tripping, emotional competition, public embarrassment masked as jokes, isolation, gaslighting. It was textbook. And yet, I had stayed for years. That was the part one couldn't forgive myself for, not at first. The staying. But then I read something in a book that changed everything. You don't stay in toxic relationships because you're weak. You stay because they make you doubt your strength. That line broke me wide open. I wasn't weak. I had just been convinced I was. I started reaching out to people I had drifted from, friends I had unintentionally pushed away because Haley didn't like them. I apologized where I needed to. I started rebuilding. Slowly. Clumsily. Honestly. And the wildest thing? Most of them welcomed me back with open arms. Turns out, people had noticed how different I'd become when I was around her. More withdrawn, more self-deprecating, more unsure of myself. They hadn't known how to help. Some had tried. But Haley had always managed to twist things, to make me think they were the problem, not her. It took time, but I started to feel something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Not all the time. Not perfectly. But there were mornings I woke up and didn't dread checking my phone. There were days I looked in the mirror and didn't immediately hear her voice pointing out my flaws. There were moments I felt proud of myself, not for being who she wanted me to be, but for being exactly who I was. The healing wasn't linear. Some days I missed her. Isn't that strange? How you can miss someone who hurt you. It's not about missing the pain. It's about missing the illusion. The shared memories, the laughter that felt real, the moments that made you believe in the friendship, even if they were built on control. But with every day that passed, I stopped romanticizing the past and started honoring the present. I started honoring me. And eventually, I did something I never thought I'd be able to do. I forgave myself. For not seeing the signs. For making excuses. For giving so much of myself to someone who gave back manipulation. For staying long after it started to hurt. I forgave myself, and I promised never to abandon myself again. For a long time, I thought boundaries were walls, cold, rigid things that kept people out. That's what Haley always made them seem like. If you really cared about me, you wouldn't need space. Why are you being so distant? Don't act like you're better than me now. She made me believe that saying no meant being disloyal, that having needs meant being needy, that standing up for myself was somehow betrayal. So when I finally cut her off, it felt unnatural to even say the word boundary. Like I was doing something wrong just by protecting myself. But slowly, I started to unlearn everything she taught me. I started with the little things, correcting people when they pronounced my name wrong instead of awkwardly smiling, declining invites when I was too tired, turning my phone off for a few hours without explaining myself. It sounds small, but to someone who had lived on edge for years, it felt revolutionary. Then came the harder boundaries. Not letting people joke about my insecurities, even if they were just kidding. Not allowing guilt to force me into situations I didn't want. Not chasing people who only showed up when they needed something. And not apologizing for outgrowing anyone who couldn't respect that. That's when I met real friends. Not perfect people. Not ones who never made mistakes. But people who didn't feel threatened by my growth. People who clapped when I won, even when they were struggling. People who listened without turning the conversation back to themselves. Who didn't compete, didn't compare, didn't cut me down just to feel taller. It felt strange at first. When someone complimented me, I waited for the dig that never came. When I shared an idea, I braced for the eye roll that didn't happen. When I cried, I didn't get mocked, I got held. That's when I realized how much damage Haley had done. She had made cruelty feel normal. She had made love feel transactional. She had taught me that connection came with a cost. But these new people? They showed me that love doesn't keep score. That you don't have to shrink to be loved. That the right people won't make you beg for basic respect. One night, months after the fallout, I was sitting on the couch with one of those new friends. Her name was Zoe. I had just opened up to her about everything that had happened with Haley. I was nervous, my voice shaking, afraid she'd think I was being petty or bitter. But Zoe just looked at me, eyes soft, and said, "You didn't deserve that. None of it. I'm so proud of you for walking away." And I broke. Not from pain, but from the overwhelming relief of being seen. Really seen. Without judgment. Without conditions. I had spent so long thinking no one would understand. That maybe I had made it all up. That maybe I was the problem all along. But hearing those words, it gave me permission to finally believe my own story. And I realized something important that night. When you leave a toxic friendship, you're not just walking away from someone else. You're walking back toward yourself. It's strange how clear everything becomes in hindsight. You replay the conversations, the tone, the side comments that once confused you, and suddenly you see them for what they really were. Not jokes. Not honesty. Not tough love. Just control. Just insecurity. Just manipulation wearing a friendship mask. I started noticing the patterns, not just in Haley, but in others I had kept around over the years. The subtle digs, the emotional baiting, the way some people made me feel like I owed them access to my life just because we had history. And it terrified me. Because once you realize you've been conditioned to accept disrespect, you start to wonder, how many times have I ignored my own instincts just to avoid conflict? I used to think that being a good friend meant being endlessly forgiving, patient, understanding. I thought being liked was the most important thing, even if it meant abandoning myself over and over again. But now I knew better. Being a good friend doesn't mean tolerating emotional abuse. It means mutual respect. It means accountability. It means love without competition or cruelty. That's when I started writing. I didn't plan to share it at first. It was just a way to make sense of everything, to untangle my thoughts, to validate my pain, to remind myself that what I went through wasn't okay. But something shifted when I posted a short story about it anonymously on a women's forum. Within an hour, I had over 200 responses. Women from all over the country, even a few from other countries, saying things like, "I thought I was the only one. This sounds exactly like my best friend. I've never had the words to explain what she did to me until now." I sat there, tears running down my face, realizing something huge. It wasn't just me. There were so many of us, walking around with invisible wounds from people who never laid a hand on us. Wounds shaped like backhanded compliments, silent treatments, fake concern, gossip disguised as venting, loyalty used as a leash. And nobody talked about it. We talk about abusive partners. We talk about toxic parents. But toxic friendships? That's still a shadowy corner people are afraid to name. But I wasn't afraid anymore. That day, I decided I wouldn't stay silent. I started sharing more stories, reflections, even screenshots of texts with names removed, of course. I wasn't trying to get revenge or play the victim. I just wanted people to see what emotional manipulation looked like when it came with a smile. And the response was overwhelming. People messaged me saying they ended toxic friendships after reading my posts. Some said they finally felt seen. Others just said thank you. Two words that meant more to me than they probably realized. That's when I knew this pain had a purpose. Haley had taken a lot from me: time, self-worth, trust. But she also gave me something I didn't expect: a voice. And I wasn't going to waste it. It had been almost a year. A year since I'd blocked her. A year since I stopped letting her voice live in my head. A year since I walked away, not just from Haley, but from who I became around her. I wasn't expecting to see her again.
I didn't want to.
I had made peace with the silence. I had found new friends, rebuilt my confidence, even started therapy. Life was quieter, clearer. And most importantly, mine. But life has a way of testing your growth when you least expect it. It happened on a Saturday afternoon at a local bookstore cafe. I had gone to meet a friend for coffee and journaling. I was wearing my favorite oversized sweater, hair pulled up in a messy bun, feeling calm, grounded, safe. And then I heard her voice behind me.
Loud.
Laughing.
Familiar.
I froze. For a moment I thought I was imagining it, that maybe my brain was playing tricks on me. But then I turned and there she was. Haley. With two girls I didn't recognize, holding a cold brew, scrolling her phone, the same smug half-smile on her face. She hadn't seen me yet. I had a split second to decide. Walk away or say something. My heart was racing. My palms were sweating. Every instinct in me said run.
Don't open that door again.
But instead, I walked up to her. I didn't have a speech planned. I didn't even know what I was doing. I just knew I needed to face it for me. She looked up, eyes widening for a flash before she quickly recomposed herself. Well, look who it is, she said casually. Didn't expect to see you in public again. That tone, that subtle jab, masked as a joke. It hit me like a flashback. For a second, I felt small again. But this time, I didn't shrink. I smiled softly.
Allez.
I won't stay long. I just wanted to say, I hope you're doing well. I really do. She blinked, surprised. I think she expected me to either cry or yell. I continued. What happened between us? I've processed it.
Eva healed.
But I needed to say it face to face. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. Her smile faltered.
Wow.
So you're, what, enlightened now? No, I said. Just free. I didn't wait for her reply. I turned and walked away, heart pounding but proud. It wasn't about being dramatic. It wasn't about getting the last word. It was about reclaiming my power, the part of me she had stolen, gaslit, twisted. For the first time, I wasn't trying to be liked. I wasn't seeking closure from her. I was giving it to myself. As I sat back down at my table, my friend gave me a look. You okay? I nodded. I'm more than okay. I opened my journal and wrote 4 words. I chose myself today. And just like that, the final thread snapped. Not with bitterness. Not with rage. With peace. You never realize how heavy something was until you finally set it down. For years, I carried Haley's voice in my head, disguised as my own. Her judgment, her comparisons, her little jokes. It took up space in my brain like background noise I could mute.
But now, without her?
There was quiet. And in that quiet, I started to hear myself again. I started doing things I used to love, but had stopped because she made me feel like they were silly. Painting. Taking photos. Dancing around my apartment barefoot to cheesy 90s songs. I wasn't doing it to impress anyone. I wasn't curating a version of myself to be palatable or praised. I was just existing. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. My self-esteem didn't come back all at once. It wasn't like flipping a switch. It was more like watering a dead plant and waiting patiently for signs of green. Some days were harder than others. Days when I'd fall into old patterns, questioning myself, doubting my choices, wondering if I was being too much or not enough. But now I noticed those thoughts, and I answered them with kindness instead of criticism. I changed the way I talked to myself. Instead of, "You're so dramatic," I said, "Your feelings are valid." Instead of, "No one's going to like you if you act like that," I said, You don't need to perform to be loved. That inner dialogue became my anchor. I also started being more intentional about the people I let into my life. I paid attention to how I felt after spending time with someone. Did I feel drained or energized? Did I feel supported or silently judged? Did I shrink or did I expand? That one question, do I shrink or expand around them, became my compass. It helped me spot the difference between real friends and people who just liked the version of me they could control. And let me tell you something. Real friends are life-changing.
They don't compete with you.
They celebrate you. They don't mock your dreams. They ask how they can help. They don't guilt-trip you for having boundaries. They respect them.
I found people like that. Slowly, surely.
People who reminded me that love doesn't come with conditions, and friendship isn't supposed to hurt. We laughed until our stomachs ached. We cried without shame. We spoke without code switching or self-editing. It felt like coming home to a place I didn't even know I'd left. And more than anything, I felt safe.
Not just with them.
With me. For the longest time, I hesitated to use the word abuse. It felt too harsh, too serious, too real. I told myself, it wasn't that bad. She didn't hit me. She didn't scream. She didn't threaten me. But emotional abuse doesn't always look like violence. Sometimes, it looks like jokes that leave bruises you can't see. Sometimes, it sounds like silence that punishes. Sometimes, it feels like being watched, judged, and slowly erased, all while smiling for photos. I started researching emotional abuse in friendships, and it hit me like a punch to the gut. The patterns I read about mirrored my experience exactly. Control disguised as concern. I'm just trying to help you make better choices. Jealousy dressed up as loyalty. I don't want you hanging out with her. She's fake. Public humiliation masked as humor. Come on, you know I'm joking. Don't be so sensitive. A gaslighting in response to pain. Wow. You really twisted that. I never said that. Conditional support. I'll be here for you, as long as you do things my way. That's when I realized I wasn't weak. I was manipulated. And I wasn't crazy. I was conditioned. Toxic friends don't just hurt you. They make you believe you're the problem, and that's the real damage. They don't steal your happiness all at once. They chip away at it piece by piece, until you're standing in front of a mirror, wondering who you've become and how you let it get this far. But here's the thing no one tells you. You can heal. You can reclaim your voice, your worth, your sense of peace. You can learn to trust again, slowly, intentionally. You can build boundaries without guilt. You can laugh without waiting for the insult hidden inside the joke. And once you've seen what manipulation looks like, you can unsee it. You'll start recognizing it in other places, in conversations, in social media captions, in the way people use language to control and confuse. And while it's painful to confront, it's also powerful, because knowledge gives you choice. And choice gives you freedom. I know now that I can love people deeply, but I never have to abandon myself to keep them close. I can be a good friend without tolerating bad behavior. I can forgive someone without inviting them back into my life. And most importantly, I am allowed to walk away, even if it hurts, even if they don't understand, even if no one else sees the abuse but me, because I see it now. And that's enough. If you're reading this and something feels familiar, if you're feeling that tight knot in your stomach, that voice whispering, "This sounds like her," I want you to know, you're not crazy. You're not overreacting. You're not too sensitive. You're waking up. And that's terrifying, because waking up means finally admitting that someone you loved, someone you trusted, might have been hurting you all along. I know what it's like to lie to yourself. To say, she means well. She's just blunt. She had a rough childhood. I know how easy it is to make excuses for them, especially when they've woven themselves so tightly into your identity, your friend group, your daily routine. I also know what it's like to doubt your own reality, to start second-guessing every memory, to wonder if you're making things up, being dramatic, seeing patterns where there are none. But if you feel confused more than you feel loved, pay attention. If you feel drained after talking to them, take note. If you feel like you have to earn their kindness, Ask yourself why. Because real friendship doesn't feel like walking on eggshells. It doesn't sound like backhanded compliments. It doesn't ask you to play small so someone else can feel big. Real friends don't punish you for setting boundaries. They don't twist your words or turn people against you. They don't clap louder for your failures than your wins. I know it's not easy to leave. You might be afraid of being alone. You might feel guilty, like you're the bad one for walking away. You might be worried about what people will say or how she'll spin the story. But let me tell you something. You don't owe anyone access to your heart just because they once held it. You are allowed to outgrow people. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to say, "This hurts me and I'm done." Leaving won't be easy. It might feel like tearing out a piece of yourself. It might come with grief and guilt and a whole lot of self-doubt.
But on the other side of that pain,
There's clarity.
there's calm.
There's you. The version of you that's been buried under years of manipulation. The one who's kind and strong and worthy, not because someone else says so, but because you are. You're not alone. You're not weak. And you are so brave for even considering the possibility that you deserve better. Because you do. We all do. If I could go back and talk to that younger version of me, the girl who laughed off the insults, who felt guilty for being hurt, who thought loyalty meant sacrificing herself, I wouldn't tell her to toughen up. I'd tell her to listen to the ache in her chest, to trust the lump in her throat when she laughed a little too hard at a joke that cut too deep, to stop explaining away the hurt, to stop mistaking cruelty for closeness. Because now I know, real friends don't make you doubt your worth. They don't mock you in front of others and call it humor. They don't make your wins feel like threats. They don't manipulate your emotions and call it love. They see you. They support you. They want you to rise, even if it means rising higher than them. What happened with Haley changed me. For a while, I hated that. I hated that someone could take up so much of my life, cause so much pain, and still live rent-free in my mind long after they were gone. But now I see it differently. Because without that storm, I wouldn't have learned how to protect my peace. Without that darkness, I wouldn't have learned to trust my own light. And maybe, just maybe, this story, my story, will help someone else step out of the fog. Maybe it'll give someone the push they need to ask, is this friendship really good for me? So, if you've made it this far, let me leave you with this. If someone constantly makes you feel small, they are not your friend. If someone controls you with guilt, jealousy, or shame, that's not loyalty. If someone undermines your joy and calls it honesty, that's not love. Real friendship lifts you up. It celebrates your growth. It holds you when you're hurting. It makes you feel safe, seen, and supported, not silenced. And if that's not what you're getting,
You have every right to walk away.
I did.
And it saved me.
So now I ask you, have you ever had a friend who made you question your worth? Did you ever laugh off comments that actually hurt deep down? Have you stayed in a friendship out of guilt, fear, or habit? Drop a comment below. You never know who you might help just by sharing your story. Emotional abuse doesn't only happen in romantic relationships. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who hide behind inside jokes, shared selfies, and promises of forever.
Let's talk about it.
Let's normalize walking away from friendships that wound. Let's create space for real connection, the kind that nourishes, not depletes. And if this story opened your eyes, please share it. Someone else out there needs to hear it. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for holding space for the truth. Thank you for being part of the healing. We all deserve better. We all deserve peace. We all deserve real love in every form.